What's going on, my dear friends? Today in this video, let's learn and master the Angular framework's latest version. So let's get started. Welcome back everyone. I am excited to share this completely updated Angular course designed specifically with beginners in mind. We'll be diving into the fundamentals, exploring the latest Angular features, and building practical projects to solidify your understanding. So let's get started on this learning journey together. Alright guys, in this section let's learn about Angular component. So first thing first, what is this Angular component? The Angular framework is a component-based front-end framework. So the main building block of an Angular application is Angular components. Without components, we cannot build a proper Angular application. So what is a component? The component is a combination of data, HTML template, and logic, which represents an area of a view that shows inside the browser. This is the view that users can see. Those components are loaded inside the browser. So let's look at a real-world example. So if I take the Facebook layout as an example, so Facebook has the top navbar, this right sidebar, left sidebar, and this Facebook wall, which shows Facebook posts, right? In Angular, we can create separate components for each of these layout areas. We can create reusable components. So for this navbar, we can create a navbar component. For each sidebar, this left and right, we can create separate sidebar components. And also for this post list, we can create a main post list component. And also inside this, we can create a component for post list. In Angular also, we can create this Facebook layout using only one page, like traditional web designs. So we add all the markups for the Facebook homepage, including the navbar, sidebar, and the post walls codes inside a single index.html file, right? So like this, in Angular also, we can add all the markups for this Facebook homepage inside the app component HTML file. But guys, trust me, it's not a good practice in Angular. Because in Angular, we can create separate components. As I said earlier, Angular is component-based front-end framework. So if we create separate components rather than put all in one component, we can reuse those components again in our application without coding it again. Wait a minute, what is this reusable thing? For example, let's take the same example as previous. In Facebook, this navbar must be shown on all pages in this home page, and if you navigate to someone's profile on that page also, we can see this navbar. So guys, if we are not using this navbar as a component, we have to copy and paste this navbar code on all our web pages. So if we use the Angular component for this, we can reuse this navbar component inside all the pages by simply importing the component to that page. We don't need to repeat the code for the navbar again and again. Hope you guys got the idea. A small task for you guys. Go to these websites and try to identify different component layouts inside that websites. First, go to the Gmail inbox layout and try to identify the components. And also go to the apple.com and identify the all components. Alright, so let's analyze the Gmail inbox. As usual guys, at the top we have the navbar component, and the left side we have the left sidebar and the inbox menu. The right side we have the right sidebar component with the widgets panel. In the mid we have the inbox mails list component. If we click this compose button, this will open this new message. We consider this also as a component, right? Let's look at the Apple website. As usual, top here we have the navbar, and here if we click on this search, this will open the search component. After that we have the cart component, and down here first we have the hero section. For this also we can create a separate component. After these features, categories, and this carousel or the slideshow. So for these each and every section also we can consider it as a separate components. And down here we have the footer component. Guys, as we learn, website is a combination of different components and each layout section can consider it as a component. Hope you guys got the idea. Perfect. So let's move on to the next chapter. Alright, so hope you guys now have an overall idea about components. As I said earlier, Angular is a component-based framework. So in order to get the full advantage of an Angular app, we have to use this component approach, right? So by default, Angular generated these app component files. And guys, this will be the main root component of our Angular application. So open this app component HTML file. Inside this, we can see these boilerplate markups. So guys, these markups are the responsible for this boilerplate weave inside the browser. So guys, how do we get this weave inside the browser? If you guys can remember, in order to load an Angular app inside the browser, we have to run our Angular app. For that, we use the ngserve command. So this command will compile the Angular code into browser-friendly code and create a development server, and this will give us the development server URL, which is this localhost colon 4200. If we visit this URL, this will load the weave inside the browser. My development server is still up and running, that's why I can weave this page, otherwise this will not work. So guys, always make sure that your Angular development server is up and running. Otherwise, use the ngserve command to rerun the application. Alright, so as I said, this default view is loaded with this app component HTML files code. Wait, I'll remove this all and add a simple h1 tag and add the heading text first Angular app. Okay, now again save this and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, the previous default view changed and this time we got the new view with this first Angular app text. So now you guys can clearly understand this is the code loaded inside the browser view. So guys, now you guys may wonder how this code or the Angular component is loaded inside the browser. So let's clear this. Look at this code inside the browser developer console. So guys, how do we open the browser developer tools? Just simply right click and inside this go to the elements tag. Inside this we can see this page HTML code. Expand this. Inside the body we can see this app root tag, and inside that we can see this h1 tag which was written inside the app component HTML file. If this page loaded the app component HTML file, how this HTML structure loaded here? And also we can see this something different HTML tag app-root. In HTML tags, there is no any known tags named as app root, right? So what's going on here? To find the answer to this, go to the VS Code and open the index.html file. Guys, in Angular, this is the main HTML file that loads inside the browser, not the app component HTML file. Then, how the app component HTML's h1 tag loaded inside this view? As you guys can see here, this app root HTML tag inside these body tags, this is where the magic happens. So guys, as you know, this is not a known HTML tag. This is something custom tag, right? So what is this? Guys, this is the component selector of the app component. I'll show you this. Open the app component TS file. Inside this, we can see this app root under this selector option. So this is the identifier of an Angular component. In order to load a component view inside the browser, we use this selector as a custom HTML tag, right? So when our Angular app loads inside the browser, by default, this will open this index.html file inside the browser. Inside this, we get the app component selector, which is this app root. When we compile our Angular app using Angular CLI, Angular compiler will automatically modify our index.html file and inject the relevant components HTML code inside this component selector tags. and this will open this modified index.html file inside the browser. So if I change this selector name to something app root test inside this index file, save this and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, this time we got nothing here. If I go to the console tab, we can see this error that says no matching element for app root selector. In order to load a component inside the view, we have to use the component selector name exactly as it is. Once again guys, when running our Angular app, Angular compiler will compile our Angular app. When compiling the index file, Angular compiler see this component select. If there is a component selector, Angular compiler will modify this index file by injecting the component's HTML code inside this component selector custom HTML element. At the end, Angular compiler will load the modified index.html file inside the browser view. So this is how the Angular loads the component inside the browser view. So hope you guys got the idea. So now hope you guys have an idea about the Angular component and how it loads inside the browser. Now in this lecture, let's see how we can create a component in Angular. When we deal with components in Angular, we have two methods. One is the hardest way and another one is the easiest way. So let's go with the hardest way, then we can understand all about Angular components, code, structure, then we can use the easiest way. So the hardest way to create a component is to create all the files and codes of Angular components from scratch. So let's do this. First thing first, let's create our first component. Guys, as I said earlier, when we develop an Angular project, we will only work within this app folder. We will not touch any other folders. Okay. So inside this, by default, we have this app component. Now what I want to do is I want to create a navbar component. So right click on this and first let's create the folder for this. The folder name is navbar. I created this folder because it will be little more organized than the putting all component inside the same folder, right? Alright, now inside this navbar folder, let's create our component. Again right click and select this new file option. Now the file name, guys, when we name an Angular component file, we have to follow this naming convention. First we have to add the component name, which is in our case navbar. After this dot component, and at last we have to pass the file extension. In Angular we use TypeScript instead of JavaScript. So the file name extension is ts. So after this .ts. That's it. So now open this file. As you guys can see here, this is an empty file. Guys, don't get confused. This is still not an Angular component. This is just a simple TypeScript empty file. In order to make this an Angular component, we have to follow 3 steps. First thing first, we have to import the Angular components module into this file. So let's do this. At the top of this page, add the import statement. Import inside curly brackets. The module name is component with capital C. So follow the capital simple letters carefully. Next, from, and we have to pass the path of this module. So inside codes, this path is @angular/core. This is coming from the Angular core module. That's it. So we successfully imported the Angular component module. Next, before we move on, some of you guys may wonder actually from where is this component module I imported here. We defined this path, but there is no folder that we can find inside the root folder of Angular. So where's this component module file? Nothing much guys, it's very simple. If you guys can remember, I told you that all the Angular framework files and modules will be downloaded and stored inside of the node modules folder, right? So inside this node modules folder, you can find the @angular folder. Inside that, we can find the core folder. So this is the path that we defined here. But again, some of you may question me, these folders are inside the node modules folder, but in here, we have not added the node modules folder path before this import path. Then how this work? It's very simple. By default, Angular knows every module that we importing to the Angular is listed inside the node modules folder. So we don't need to add the node modules folder before this import path. When Angular see this import, Angular will automatically look inside the node modules folder. Hope you guys got the idea. So the first step is completed. We successfully imported the Angular component module to this TS file. Still, this is not a component. So we have to follow the second step. So as the second step, we have to use this imported component module. So let's see how to use this. Very simple. Down here, add this code, add component, parentheses, and this required object parameter. So open and close curly brackets. Inside this object, we can define the data of our components. In here, we have to pass few data. So first thing first, we have to add the selector of this component. As you guys know, this selector is very important. Without this, we cannot load this component inside the browser view. So inside this, the property key is for the selector is selector. So after this, colon, and the value is the selector for this navbar component is navbar. So pass this inside of quotes. So guys, as a good practice in Angular, we prefix the component selector name with app keyword. Something like this, app-navbar. If this component is sidebar, so the selector will be app-sidebar, right? Guys, this is just a good practice in Angular. Without this prefix, also this will work without any issues, right? So next we have to define whether this component is a standalone component or not. In the previous versions of Angular, components are not standalone. But in Angular 17 and up, by default, they made Angular components as standalone components. So in here, we have to define that. The key is standalone and the value is true. If we want to make this component standalone, we use true, otherwise we can pass false. Guys, don't worry about this standalone component. In the next lectures, we will learn about this feature in detail. So for now, just keep this in your mind. How do we define standalone components in Angular? Perfect. So that's all for this second step. Alright, let's move on to the third step. As the third step or the last step, we have to create the component class. So down here, class keyword, and the class name, the component name is navbar, and the class scope. So guys, same as the select naming convention, for this also we use the app prefix as a good practice. For the selector, we use all lowercase letters and we combine the both words with dash symbol. But for the class name, we use the camel case naming convention. So first letter of two words are uppercase. No hyphen or dashes between two words. App navbar. That's all. So guys, now this file has officially been converted as an Angular component. So guys, we successfully created our first Angular component. Let's see how to load this component inside the browser view. As you guys know, in order to load an Angular component inside the browser view, we have to add that component selector inside the index.html file. This is how this app component loaded inside the browser, right? So using the same approach, let's try to load this component also inside the browser view. Alright, in order to load this navbar component inside the browser view, we have to add the component selector inside the index.html file. So go to the index.html file and add this selector. So after this, app root selector. So our navbar component selector is app-navbar. Add this as a custom HTML tag. We successfully added the component selector. Now save this all and go to the browser. We have got nothing here. We can see only this first Angular app text which is coming from the app component file. So guys, what's going on here? Can you guys guess? If you can remember, in the navbar component, we just only created the component. there are no HTML codes to load inside the view, right? So how do we add the HTML code here? For this, in Angular components, we have two approaches. So let's first look at the first approach. So guys, inside the component file, we can write our HTML code. For this, we have a special property called template. So inside this, this also same as this select option. So we can pass the template property inside this component decorator. So after this, let's pass this. The property key is template and the value inside codes. Now we can pass any valid HTML codes inside these codes as this template property value. So let's open and close h1 tags and set the value to something navbar component. Alright, now we have the HTML code to show inside the browser view. So let's save this and go to the browser. Look at this guys, still we got nothing. We have the HTML code and also we added the component selector name inside the index of the HTML file as well. So now what is the problem? So guys, the problem is here we are trying to access a separate component file from this index.html file. So the problem is index.html file doesn't know about the existence of this navbar component file. So what do we have to do is, the first thing first, we have to create a connection between this index.html file and with the navbar component file. So how do we do that? Very simple. For this, we have a separate file in Angular, which is this main.ts file. So go to this main.ts file and open it. Inside this, as you guys can see here, we have something method called bootstrap application. So this method gets two parameters. One is the app component and other one is the app config. So what are these? As you guys know, now the HTML code which is inside the app component file is loading inside the browser. So this is loading inside because of this. As you guys know, in traditional website, we sometimes write external JavaScript and CSS in a separate file. So in this case, in order to apply the external JavaScript and all the CSS styles, we have to link those separate files into the index.html file. Otherwise, index.html file doesn't know about existence of these separate files. So then only browser will understand there is another separate JavaScript file and it will read the separate JavaScript code and apply the logics inside the browser view. So the same thing happening here. With this bootstrap application method, also we are kind of linking the external component file with the index.html file, which is not exactly the same what I am saying. This is not linking like a separate CSS or JavaScript file. This is more than that, but for now, just simply keep this in your mind. With this bootstrap application method, we are connecting the external component files with the index.html file. So this is what happening with this bootstrap application method. So hope you guys got the idea. So as I said earlier, so inside the browser view, we got this app components text. So this is loading inside the browser because by default, the Angular is connected the app component with the index.html file. So as you guys can see here, inside this bootstrap application method, we are passing the app component as the parameter for this method. So that's how this app components view is loaded inside the browser. So now what we have to do is we have to show the navbar component also inside the browser. For this, we have to pass the navbar component to this bootstrap application in order to render the navbar component inside the browser. So how do we do that? Just for now, simply pass the navbar component as the second parameter for this bootstrap application. So first thing first, in order to pass the navbar component to here, we have to import the navbar component file to this main.ts file. So how do we do that? Very simple. Just at the top of this page, after the imports, add this code, import, open and close curly brackets. So this time we are importing the navbar component. So the navbar component name is app navbar. So after this, we have to pass the path of the navbar component. So after this, from inside codes, the navbar component is inside the app folder. So dot slash app slash navbar dot component. Also guys, we don't need to pass the file extension .ts here. Angular will already know this is a TS file. Guys, we have a problem here. As you guys can see here, we are getting this red underline under this app navbar. So guys, this is the compile error. So what is the problem here? So let's hover on this and we can see this error saying app navbar is declared, but its value is never read. So what is the problem here? So guys, this app navbar is this class that we defined inside the navbar component file. In order to access this class from another file, we have to export this class. In here, we are not exporting and this class is private. So in that case, we cannot access this app navbar class from this main.ts file. That's why we are getting this error. So in order to fix this, add the export keyword before this class name. That's it. So save this and go to the main.ts file. Now as you guys can see here, the error is gone. Perfect. Now guys, we have the import. Now let's pass this navbar component to this bootstrap application method as the second parameter. So after this app component parameter, add the app navbar. Wait a minute guys, again we got another compile error. Under this app config, we can see this red underline. If I over on this, we can see this error. This error is saying expected 1 to 2 arguments but got 3. So what is this error? So guys, this bootstrap application method requires only one parameter or two parameters. But here we are passing 3 parameters. So that's why we are getting this compile error. So in order to move forward, we have to change this parameter count to 2 parameters. So let's remove the app component from here. And as you guys can see here, now this is okay. So I think that's it for this. We successfully linked the app navbar component to the index.html file. So guys, now save this and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, this time we are not getting anything inside the browser. So what is the problem this time? So in order to find this problem, we have to look inside the browser console. So we are not getting any compile errors inside the code editor and also inside the integrated terminal. But inside the browser console, we got this error saying this app navbar component is not marked as standalone. So now what is this error? From Angular 17 and upper, Angular by default changed all the components as standalone components. So in previous versions of Angular, the components were either standalone or non-standalone according to our choice. And by default, the previous versions of Angular components are non-standalone. So from Angular 17, Angular components are now standalone. In order to use the Angular components, we have to define that this navbar component is a standalone component or not. So in order to fix this, go to the navbar component TS file and inside this same component decorator, we have to pass this property. The property name is standalone. Carefully follow these capital simple letters and the value is true. So that's it. This will fix this error. So guys, I am not diving deep into what is these standalone components. So we have another separate dedicated section for this. In that section, you guys will learn about this in detail. Alright, so let's move on. Save this and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, this time we can see the navbar component text inside the browser, which means this is successfully loaded the navbar component inside the browser. Alright, so before we move on, some of you guys may notice that inside the browser, this time we only got the navbar component text, but we are not getting the app component files h1 tag, which is this first Angular app. So now what is the problem? Can you guys guess? Yes, of course. The problem is previously we removed the app component from this bootstrap application method and we replaced that with the navbar component. So that's why this time the index.html file doesn't know about the app component. So the Angular CLI also knows only about the navbar component. So that's why this loaded only the navbar component text inside the browser web. So guys, I want to load the app component also inside the browser. So how do we solve that? In a real world Angular application, there will be hundreds of components inside of a single project. So in order to show all the components inside the browser view, if we use this method, we can't do that because for this bootstrap application method, we can only pass one component at a time. So this is a big problem, right? So as a solution for this, Angular is by default giving us this app component as the Angular project's root component. So guys, when I describing these files tree and this main.ts file, I said we will not touch all these files, we only work within the app component folder. So I modify this main.ts file to give you an understand how does the Angular loads components inside of a web browser. So that's why I modified this main.ts file. Otherwise, we will not touch this file. So hope you guys got the idea. So guys, when we develop an Angular application, we will keep all these default files as it is and we will work within the app folder. And we will create all the components inside this app folder. And what we'll do is, in order to load those components inside the browser, we will nest those components using our main root component, which is the app component. So now let's see this in action. Before that, I will reset all the modified codes inside this main.ts file. So remove these navbar component imports and this parameter. After this, add the app component here. Now inside the index.html file, remove the navbar component selector. That's it. So save this all and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, this time this loaded the app component text, which is this first Angular application. So now let's see how to nest components. So guys, think this is like something, a big box. Inside of that big box, we will stack small boxes, right? So the app component is like the big box. So inside that, we will nest all the other components like the small boxes, right? So guys, this is also the same as the index.html file. In order to load another component file inside of the browser, we have to add that component selector as a custom HTML tag. So inside of this app component HTML file, so after this, add the navbar component selector. The navbar component selector is this app-navbar. So don't forget to add this as a custom HTML tag. Now, as you guys can see here, we are getting a compile error that's saying this app navbar is not a known element. So guys, what is this error? It's also the same as the previous. In order to show the app navbar component inside the index.html file, we have to create a connection between those files. So the same scenario like in the previous. So in order to access the navbar component HTML codes from the app component, we have to create a connection between these two files. If you can remember, so for the index.html file, we use the main.ts file to create the connection. So guys, for this component nesting, we don't need a separate file. For this, we will do this connection inside the same app component file. So we have the app component ts file. So inside that we have this component decorator. So inside that we have to add a new property called import. So the key is imports and the value is we have to pass this as an array. So open and close square brackets. Inside this component name is app navbar. So again we are getting another compile error because in order to use this app navbar components here we have to import that. So guys, don't get confused. This import is coming with this component decorator. This is a property inside of this components object, right? So in order to pass the navbar component to this imports property, we have to import that navbar component to this app component ts file, right? So top of this page, add the import statement, import inside curly brackets. The component name is app navbar and this is coming from, so give the path inside codes dot slash navbar component. That's it. So now we successfully imported the navbar component to this app component file. So save this and go to the HTML file. Now as you guys can see here, this time the compile error is disappeared. So everything is now looks good. Save this all and go to the browser. Inside the browser, as you guys can see here, this time browser loaded this navbar component text as well as this app components h1 tag. So guys, this is how we nest components. So I think if we have another component for the header component, we can nest that component also inside the app component. Then this will also load inside the browser. So guys, for now just keep this in your mind. In order to load components inside the browser, we will use the app component as our main root component. Then we will list all other components inside the app component file. So then we can load all the components inside the browser. So as a good practice, we will not touch the index.html file or the main.ts file. So I modified those files to give you a clear picture of how the components works behind the scenes. Hope you guys got the idea. So guys, we will deep dive more into these nested components in later sections. So any of you guys don't get anything about these nesting components, leave it for now. We will learn about this later. So alright, that's it for this chapter. Let's move on to the next chapter. So guys, now we know how to create a component manually and how to load that component inside the browser. Guys, when we learn components, I say that component is a combination of HTML, CSS and JavaScript or the TypeScript. So in order to show something inside the browser view, at least we need a few lines of HTML codes, right? When dealing with Angular components, in order to write HTML codes inside the components, we have two approaches. So the first approach, we already wrote that in the previous section using this template property inside the components decorator. So in the previous example, we wrote this simple h1 text inside this template property, right? Now guys, think if you want to add another paragraph inside this component, how do we do that? So the simplest way is we can add that inside the template property after this h1 tag. So just simply create a p tag and add a dummy paragraph text. So save this and go to the browser. Inside the browser, now we can see this paragraph, right? So guys, in here, some of you guys may wonder why didn't I add this p tag in the second line? So there is a reason for this, guys. Wait, I'll show you. Let's put this p tag in the second line. Now save this. As you guys can see here, we are getting a compile error. So guys, when we dealing with this property template, we can write HTML codes in one line. But in any case, if we want to write multiple lines of HTML code, we have to use the tilde codes instead of these simple codes. Okay. Let's see this in action. So guys, now remove these single quotes and replace them with this tilde symbol, which you can locate before the number 1 key on your keyboard. As you guys can now see here, the compile error is no more. So save this and go to the browser. This is still working as previous, which means now you can write multiple lines of HTML codes under this template property. So let's add another code after this. So this time let's add a button tag. The button text will be something submit. So save this and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, we got the button inside the browser view. So guys, like this, we can design the HTML page view of this component inside this template property. And guys, once again, if any case, if you're using the single quotes or double quotes instead of the metal day symbol, you guys cannot write multiple lines of HTML like this. But you guys have to stack all the HTML codes in one line, then this will work. So, alright guys, so hope you guys got the idea about how to write HTML codes inline inside the component file. So next, let's move on to the next chapter. So now what I want to do is I want to change the color of this h1 tag to red color. So how do we do that? Inside the component file, for this also we have a separate property like this HTML template property, which is styles property. So using this property, we can write inline CSS inside this component file, same like this HTML code. So let's see this in action. So now inside this component decorator, after this, add the property of the CSS styles. So after this colon, now we can pass the CSS codes as the value for this styles property. So now what I want to do is I want to change this h1 color to red. So the CSS property for this is color and the value is red. Don't forget to pass this inside of quotes. That's it. Save this all and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, this navbar text turned to red, which means we successfully applied CSS styles to this h1 tag. Okay, so next guys, think like this HTML code in case if you want to write separate lines of CSS codes. So how do we do that? For this also, we can use the same approach as the previous. We can use the tilde symbol instead of the quotes. So let's say this. Now remove these quotes and replace them with tilde symbol. Then now we can break lines inside this. So next let's add a background color to this heading text. So inside this CSS property, for this we can use the background property. So the CSS property is background and set the value to something black. That's it. So save this and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, now this background color is in black. So guys, this is how we write multiple lines of CSS codes inside the components file using the styles property. So guys, in the previous lecture, we learned how to write HTML codes and CSS codes inside this component file. So guys, for these kinds of one line or two lines of codes, this approach is okay. But unfortunately, in real world applications, we have to write hundreds of or maybe thousands of lines of codes in a single HTML page or a CSS page. So in that case, if we write the 100 lines of codes inside this component decorator, what you guys think? This will be messy and this component file will unnecessarily get big. If in any case we get any bugs, we cannot easily identify those bugs, right? So in order to prevent this, Angular has a better approach for these templates and styles. So we can create separate HTML file and a separate style CSS file for this. If you look at the app component, this app component has already separate files for this separate HTML file and this separate CSS file. So like that, we can create a separate style and HTML file for this navbar component as well. So let's see this in action. So as for this, let's create an HTML file. Go to the file tree inside this app folder. Now right click on our components folder, which is this navbar component folder, and create a new file. The file name is the same as this navbar.component, and the file extension will be, we are creating this file to write HTML code, so the extension is .html. So this is the file name convention for the component HTML file. First we have to define the component name, then the component keyword, and at last the HTML extension code. That's it. So guys, as I said earlier, this is just a best practice to name a component in Angular. If you guys want to change this, you guys can change it, but if you guys can follow this, it will be helpful for your career. Always try to follow best practices. Perfect. So now inside this, we can write our HTML code. So for now, let's write a simple h1 tag. So inside this HTML file, add this, create an h1 tag, and the heading text will be something. This is from HTML file. That's it. For now, save this and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, we got our first heading. This is coming from the component template property, but we are not getting this external heading text inside the browser view. So what is the problem here? Can you guys guess? Yes, of course. Guys, here also we just created this new HTML file, but we are not connecting or linking this file to any other components file. So therefore Angular compiler doesn't know about this file and this will not compile. So that's why we are not getting this external component files view inside the browser. In order to fix this, we have to link this file into our component file. So how do we do that? For this also guys, we have a separate property called template URL. So using this, we can connect external HTML file to our component, right? So let's see this in action. Now go to the component TS file. Inside this, let's connect our external HTML file. So inside this component decorator, for this we have a separate property called template URL. So add that here. The property name is template URL. This U is uppercase. So guys, please carefully follow these capital simple letters, otherwise you guys will get errors. So now to this property, we have to pass our external HTML files path. So we have to pass this as a string, open and close a single quote. Inside this, the path is /, because this is inside the same folder. After this, the file name is navbar.component.html. So we have to pass this component file name exactly the same as this, otherwise this will not work. Okay. So now that's it. Save this and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, now we got this text. This is coming from our external HTML file. So guys, which means our external file is successfully connected to our component. But guys, if you guys look at this carefully, this time we are getting only this heading text which is coming from the external HTML file. But we are not getting the heading text that we passed earlier using the template property inside the component TS file. So what do you guys think? What is the problem here? So guys, in Angular, if we want to write HTML code, we have to use either one of this method. We can write inline or we can use an external HTML file. If you link an external file to the component file, this will automatically ignore the inline HTML codes. So that's why we are not getting this inline HTML heading inside the browser. Hope you guys got the idea. So guys, before end of this video, let's see how to connect external CSS file to this component. So guys, this also the same like the previous. So first thing first, we need a separate file. So let's create that inside the same folder. Create new folder, right click and create new folder. Right click and create new file. The file name is as usual. First, the component name navbar.component. The extension is CSS. That's it. So now inside this, we can write the code for CSS codes. So let's change this heading text color to green. So the heading property is h1 and the CSS property is for this is color, and set the value to green. So save this and go to the browser. Now as you guys can see here, the styles are not applied. So the same question, why is that? Can you guys guess? Yes, of course, the same problem like previous. In order to use this, we have to link this to our component file. So for this also we have a property called styles URL. So go to the component TS file and add this. The property is styles URL, and the value inside quotes, pass the path of the external CSS file dot slash. The file name is navbar.component.css. That's it. So save this and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, this time this heading text turned to green. Why is that? The same thing as the previous. When using an external CSS file, this inline CSS will not work, right? So this is what happens here. With the inline CSS, we added this red color and the background black. Previously, it was applied to this heading text. Now this has changed to the green color, which is coming from the external CSS file. So hope you guys got the idea. So guys, this is the best approach to write HTML and CSS for component file. Throughout this course, we will use this approach. We will not write any inline HTML or CSS codes inside the component file. So that's it for this chapter. Let's move on to the next. So in the previous lectures, we learned how to create an Angular component from scratch. So now hope you guys have a clear picture of how this component works in the Angular project. So now guys, when we create the component manually, I said that there are two approaches to create these Angular components in Angular. So the first method was creating a component using the manual way. So it's the hardest way. Now let's see the easiest way of creating this component. So how do we do that? Guys, for this we can take the advantage of Angular CLI. So Angular CLI has bundled with a command to create this component and all required other files, and to create the connection between each other files. So let's see this in action. So now let's create a component for the header area. So go to the integrated terminal in the VS Code. Inside this, let's generate our new component using the Angular CLI. As you guys know, in order to access the Angular CLI, we have the command ng. So type that here, ng. After this, we are going to generate something. So the command is generate. After this, what we are going to do is, we are going to generate a component. So pass component. So the command is ng generate component. So after this, we have to pass the component name. So we are creating this component for the header. So the component name is header. So now guys, we don't need to pass the component keyword and the file extension to this. Angular CLI will automatically create this component including best practices, right? So guys, in order to execute this command, hit enter. As you guys can see here, this command is executed. Inside this, we can see these messages saying that these files are created. Header component is file, HTML file, and the header component CSS file. If you look at the file tree, inside this folder, we can find this header folder. Inside, we can find all the header component related files. So as you guys know, when we are executing the CLI command, we didn't mention about the app folder or this naming conventions. Angular CLI followed all the best practices automatically. So this is the beauty of Angular CLI. So guys, inside this you can find 4 files. When we're creating the previous component manually, we just created only 3 files, which are the TS file and the HTML file and the CSS file. So but inside this header component folder, we can find these 4 files. So the new file is this component.spec.ts file. So guys, this file is mainly used for testing purpose. So in this section, we are going to cover the Angular testing. So in the testing section, we will learn about this in detail. Alright, so guys, we got the component files. So open the component.ts file. Inside this, we can find all the relevant component codes. So you can see the import of the component module, and here we can find the component decorator. Inside that, we can find all the properties that we need for Angular component. And also down here, we can see this class and the component name header component. And also guys, we can see this export keyword. Why we are exporting this? Because in order to access this class outside of this component, we have to export this, right? So next we have the HTML file. Inside that we can see the p tag with the text, with this text. So next we have this style component CSS file, and inside that this file is empty, right? So now guys, I want to load this component inside the browser. So how do we do that? For this, as usual, we have to use the component selector. So let's add this inside the app component file. Okay guys, remember why we are adding this component selector inside the app component HTML file. We learned about this, right? So now add this. After this, the component selector name is app header. Create this as a custom HTML tag. As you guys can see here, we are getting a compile error. Why is that? You guys already know. We learned about this because in order to work with this component, we have to make connection between these two components. So we access the header component from the app component. So we have to import the header component to this app component. So go to the app component.ts file. Inside this, imports property, add this. Our component class name is header component. So guys, when we are typing this, you guys can see these auto suggestions. This is coming from the VS Code. So select our header component from this drop down. As you guys can see here, when I select this, this will automatically add the import statement of the header component. So we don't need to write this manually like the previous. So guys, this has nothing to do with the Angular. This feature is coming from our code editor VS Code. Okay, so alright, now we successfully imported the component. Now go to this HTML file. Now we are not getting any compile errors. Save this all and go to the browser. As you guys can see here, now we can see this header component text here. So guys, if you guys can remember, when we creating the component manually, we did all these steps one by one by hand. But with the Angular CLI, we got all the required configurations and all the required files automatically. This is the beauty of Angular CLI. So from now on, throughout this course, I will use Angular CLI to generate Angular components. So guys, before we move on, I have a small question for you. So this header components p tag loaded inside the browser. So how this loaded inside the browser? This HTML code is inside of a separate file. So how this is loaded inside the browser? Can you guys tell me? Yeah, yes, of course. Because inside the header component.ts file, we can see this template URL property. With this, we are linking the header component HTML file with the component.ts file. So that's why we are getting the header components view inside the browser. Hope you guys got the idea.